And we are live.
Okay, everyone, this is another Wolfram Institute Community Forum. We dedicate these fora to answering questions that anyone in our community has, engaging with them. So this is not a pre-scripted, uh, well, actually, none of our meetings are pre-scripted, but this is not a research stream that has a preset agenda. We'll talk about whatever it is that you guys want to talk about. So, what we do usually is we allow people to post questions in the chat, but also there are questions that kind of accumulate in our Discord server, and Carlos usually kind of scrapes those, and and then um, and then we'll kind of ask them, pose those questions during the streams. So, Carlos, I think we have received some nice questions in the Discord server. So, what should we discuss first?
So it's going to look a little bit wonky for the stream for a second, but um, so we have been asked to explain our kind of academic story or scientific story. So Macy asked, personal question for the people working in the institute. When did you become interested in academics and started properly studying extracurricular? So James responded this. I responded this in text as well a little bit. We took it as a sort of live story of what took us here. So I guess it will be interesting to reply in this vein.
Well, what should we do? Should we repeat what we said on the stream, just for the benefit of the viewers, or should we kind of just pass the question to Nick and to Lukash?
Well, we should definitely repeat our answers or add to them. I just gave a very
Okay, okay,
brief
okay.
one.
Well, my answer was kind of long, but I guess I could just repeat it all over again. When did I become interested in academic affairs? Well, so I come from an academic family, I guess. I mean, it's not I'm not like it's not that both my parents are academics, just my father, and no one in my extended family is involved with anything academically, but my dad is. So my dad's a professor of aerospace engineering, and so he came to the U.S. to work at NASA in California, NASA Ames, and they kind of. I spent some time as a kid kind of traveling around to different kind of university-based cities like Ithaca, Palo Alto, Ann Arbor. And then my parents lived in D.C. and now they live in Boulder, in Colorado. So it, academic affairs were not like foreign to me; they were kind of just the default, and I kind of treated them as a default. Like I remember I would say things to my dad like, these are my dreams. This is what I want to do as an adult. But if that all fails, I guess I could just like be a professor or something. And I think I don't think he was really. I think he was kind of insulted by that actually. But that is kind of how I felt. Um, so I guess I mean, when I was a teenager, I basically just studied all the time because we kind of moved around a little bit, and so it was somewhat hard to maintain kind of long-term friendships. Like I know people who have always lived in the same town and they've like known the same people since they were really young, but I was kind of uprooted quite often, and so yeah, I basically just studied all. That's basically all I did. Basically, just studied all the time, and I had to learn whatever social skills that I have later. um, But after doing all that, I was pretty pissed off when I got to undergrad because I felt like I had worked so hard to get there, and um, it didn't seem that challenging, and I just didn't like the culture. Like one thing that I never really understood was like, I mean, and maybe I don't know if it's a U.S. problem, but it's like it seems like basically everyone, like a lot of people were going to university, like a lot, I mean, I guess I was like, I didn't know everyone in my high school, and I was with all the kind of overachiever kids, but they all, like, none of them were like, oh, I'm going to go do a startup or I'm going to go do this or that thing. Like everyone was going to university. It was like not even, um, it didn't even seem as though it was an option. And it seemed like the whole purpose of high school was just to prepare everyone to go to university. So then, like, everyone was there at university. And it wasn't as though everyone was interested in thought or intellectual affairs, right? It was just like everyone was kind of there because it was kind of a prerequisite for any kind of career. And so I didn't like the environment at all because it didn't even seem like it was focused on education. And I found the classes were kind of easy and I didn't like them. And the whole thing was just kind of very self-congratulatory. It was like, congratulations, you're at this nice school, but no one really seemed to actually really care about um, ideas, at least the people that I met. So I was pretty, yeah, I was pretty pissed off as a young person, like at 18, 19. So I think all of this kind of, you know, if I had just had a good college experience as an undergrad, I'd probably just be some brat somewhere without any kind of rebellious attitudes. But it really, I mean, I felt so swindled. Felt like I had thrown away my teenage years just to get into this university that seemed like a waste of time. And so I was also kind of paranoid in the sense that I felt like most people at the university were kind of being kind of pushed through this kind of illusory period where it seemed like the possibilities were endless and they could do anything, but they actually weren't getting any skills and they weren't working very hard. And it seemed kind of obvious to me that like this was like a 4-year party, and then they were going to get kind of spat out and they were going to end up in some career track with very few options, which kind of looked back at some people that I know, and unfortunately, this seemed to kind of be the case. So I was kind of paranoid as hell that unless I did something strongly kind of independent and I made some bold move, that people were going to give me a lot of bad advice, and I was just going to end up being some generic entry in a large gray anonymous labor pool, and basically my life was going to be over. So I was really scared of just and doing something like that. So I made a bunch of pretty risky and kind of reckless. I just tried to do things that I thought were interesting and that other people weren't doing. That included things like travel, and it just included things like learning a lot of different skill sets and being involved, just learning about a lot of different fields. And so I found that to be quite interesting. I found it to be much more interesting than being a student in a lecture hall. And so I just learned about a lot of different things. Um, Everything from like architecture or finance to conflict studies, international affairs, diplomacy. I just learned about a lot of things. A lot of things that are like very kind of gritty and real world. And then with time, after a few rough years being in West Africa and DC, just learning about really horrible, just living in places where the conditions are really bad and coming to terms with a lot of hard real world truths, becoming quite enamored with higher mathematics and computing, and realizing that there was so much freedom there. And so I had been really dissatisfied as a university student, but kind of eventually I came to appreciate that math and science, if kind of done right, just offers this unbelievable liberty and freedom. And I wanted to kind of come up with a way to approach that in my own way, and in the long term to kind of make use of that to actually solve problems in the real world, but also hopefully solve some real problems in science, because it seemed as though science had been somewhat debilitated by the current kind of operational procedures that kind of inform it. So anyway, yeah, so eventually came to the summer school, and I think Steve and I got along well because I had learned about a lot of different things, and I actually had suspected that I would join the summer school and be like a weird outlier, but then it occurred to me that Steven's like a CEO and he's really interested in technology and economics and world affairs and all this stuff. So we talked about a lot of things, and then, well, I guess the rest is history. So so I have in terms of my interest in academic affairs, it was kind of like, it was something that I just kind of presumed everyone would do, and then I did not like the way that it was done, and then I was kind of decidedly non-academic for a while, and now, I think I said in the Discord channel, I mean, now just want the institute to kind of um, fill this kind of void that I noticed when I was younger. When I was younger, I was always trying to find like cool institutions that did very serious research, but had some sort of independent streak to them. And like there were some, but never one that I really liked. And so that's like I was obsessed with that kind of thing for a really long time. And so I'd love to have something where, 23-year-old me or something. I mean, I'm only 28. I'm not really that old, but like 23-year-old me would look at this and say, "Ah, yes, this is the kind of thing I want to do." And so when I'm approached by people with different kinds of backgrounds, I also just want to try and be kind of accommodating and responsive and friendly because I did send out a lot of emails when I was like really young and basically not even get replies, and that really makes you feel bad when you're young and you're trying to figure out what to do. So trying to kind of, I mean, it's a great opportunity, and just trying to kind of not necessarily give back, but just create opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be there. So that kind of informs my approach.
Yeah. I think Nick or Lucas should go next.
Wow. I don't know. I can be short. It's like because because I don't like long speeches anyway. But I can say that the academic world, I've been kind of never even been a part of it at any time, and I've also been like a very late bloomer at curiosity side. It's like I haven't even considered to become like intellectually active at all in my life very late, right? It only when all the subjects at middle school maybe was over and I accidentally become inspired by like some popular physics, I don't know, shows and so on, then I just on my own become also interested in physics. But at this point I only cared about and been good naturally at mathematics and computer science. I don't care about any subject at all at that point, like literature, especially history and such things, right? And then it's also been the time when I've been basically learning a lot of programming, hacking, all about internet computers, because they actually at this was good time in history when this became available, right? So it's kind of a very nice alignment in my life, and the internet was become very good. I could download shows, I could learn English, and there's like a lot of histories, a lot of lectures that I can download and learn by myself, right? And then I just, and actually going to university was just like a phase to be. It's like just something that has to be done. It's not a requirement. Just get to pass through. Just get pass through this thing. Not pay attention to the minimal requirements almost to just get along, right? While just pursuing my own interests. And my interest was just programming, maybe physics, but mostly just computer science, even though I studied physics officially. And I also kind of have a great dissatisfaction of academics in principle, because, well, the greatest anecdote, I guess, I've been even expelled once for failing my PE classes because they are mandatory. They were mandatory in the university here. I was just ignoring them completely, so I get expelled because I couldn't run like twice a week around the university buildings and so on. So it was ridiculous, right? So that was actually the best time of my life, because that one short year when I just didn't do anything. I just prepared for my I leave this university, go to Moscow instead, and right, and start from scratch. But while I'm doing it, I was also learning the most like various subjects I could from the internet, like downloading lectures. I was learning like gross anatomy, just like some group theories, all the mathematics stuff, physics stuff. Continuum programming, like all the programming languages that I could find, it's like all exoteric ones, even, right? Just like load it up, and then I just basically was admitted to university just to study. I let them teach me physics because I couldn't study it myself as I hoped it would be. It wasn't easy to study it by myself, so I decided physics would be a nice subject actually to people forcing me onto it. Kind of could help me later. I could just continue studying by myself. I can achieve that, I think, so that I can now study physics without any help. So, and after that, I just I ended up at Wolfram School, then at Wolfram Research, because Wolfram language is just one of those languages that I learned during this all years of programming and become good at it. So I get naturally good at it, and then I met James. We did some mathematics research with Steven. Mathematics is also a nice field to learn, even you don't know about it, but it's like right? This is just fascinating topic. If you don't know anything about it, it's interesting to learn. It's like I guess it's most of my prime objective is not to like bring value into this world, but rather to have it as a side effect of me learning about stuff instead, right? So the prime objective is just to learn, and the value I bring is just a side effect of me learning, and that's how I kind of felt most of my adult life to this point, and I kind of continue thinking about it like this. So, yeah.
And that was pretty long. Probably hopefully about as long as my. Yeah, that's me. Well, Mukash, life story.
Like dissatisfaction with academia is sort of recurring theme here. Yeah. Like, yeah, I always found school and then university as sort of being in my way to actually learn things. Just I was learning on my own. The most thing I know, I self-taught myself. And then, like, I had to go to school, I had to go to university and so on because, like, everyone does it. But I decided I will use that time to actually have, like, meaningful discussions that bring something into my life. So I was going there just socially and meeting with people and discussing my idea that I was learning and developing in my free time. So yeah, when it comes to academia, I'm mostly thankful for people who were around me, and like classes and everything was sort of in the background of that. Yeah.
I think Wukash might be an example, actually, of someone. Because I think Wukash is probably the youngest amongst us. So Wukash might be the kind of first example of someone kind of young who got an opportunity that I kind of wish I could have gotten when I was young. I mean, Wukash, I think when I first met Wukash, I was asking him about university, and it was clear he was looking basically for any excuse to kind of drop out. And so I think the proposition, which is like drop out and come study postdoctoral mathematics at the institute instead, I think is a pretty good deal. I mean, I think it would be a long time before anyone would let Wukash like start working on Langlands in a normal university setting. So the fact that he gets to kind of just skip the line and go to that directly, I think is cool.
Yeah, like when COVID came, all of this social stuff actually was killed, and I was just left with classes and exercise classes like this and so on, and it was just like, oh my god, like I can't stand this anymore. Like, what's going on? Like, I had classes, but like I could actually use my time better. Like, I would learn more than just doing my own stuff.
Well, classes are still good. It's like I enjoy watching lectures occasionally.
Yeah, but you need to have good lectures. Like,
but only when I can.
Like, what percentage of lectures were actually good lectures at your university?
Yeah.
Watching lectures asynchronously on your own time at your leisure is one thing. But like, as I understand it, like if you're a student, you have to wake up at 8 a.m. to attend a mandatory online Zoom lecture, and like you don't even live in the same city anymore or something. It's I don't know. Seems like a bad use of one's time.
Yeah.
All right, Carlos.
You can actually
Oh yeah.
you can actually pick up the best lectures available out there from like every field you want to learn, and not just this bunch of people giving you lectures where like 10% of them are actually good at them.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
How you feeling, Carlos?
Okay, I mean,
Okay.
actually, cognitively, I'm very destroyed. I don't know why,
Yeah.
but
Carlos has COVID. He has COVID at the Scottish Rite, which is like especially, aggressive, I imagine.
Yeah. No, but I think I can. My memory is still intact, luckily, so I can can describe my path into the present. I never fit the academic profile. I never really enjoyed school when I was a kid. I was a very rebellious kid in a way. I didn't have any academic parents or anything like that. I mean, my parents were highly trained, doctors, engineers, whatever, but they were not in university. And yeah, I mean, when I was 12, around 11, 12, I was always very passionate. When I found something, I went all into one topic at a time, in this kind of autistic way. And when I found physics and mathematics, it was like, okay, this is it. I made all my natural sort of childlike curiosity into something that could be projected as a profession eventually. Especially my parents were telling me, yeah, you can go to university and then you can basically spend the entire day studying physics. I was like, oh, that sounds like a good deal, because now I have to sit through all this burden of history and linguistics and whatnot. I thought, oh, I just want to do physics all day. So it's kind of paradoxical that now I've founded this multidisciplinary society where we welcome everything. But yeah, it's been mostly a path of turning my curiosity into a professional path. I worked really hard, as James said. I feel some degree of empathy and sort of parallelism between our lives, because I worked really hard during my last few years of high school, and I joined university. Worked really hard in university. I got to go to Cambridge with a scholarship, and get very high grades and everything, and really like game the system, right? Play the system, play the game in the system, like properly. And when I was at Cambridge, I mean, I was literally sitting I remember an anecdote. I was sitting next to Stephen Hawking in a talk by his student on black holes, and I remember thinking, I mean, he was just sitting there. I was having my lunch, and he just got into the room, and I thought, wow. When I was 14, I was reading books by this guy, and now here I am. I'm just sitting in the audience with him. It's not even like I'm listening to a talk by him. So that gave me the perspective of like, okay, I kind of made it in some sense. Like I kind of the effort kind of paid off. And I was completely dissatisfied with, as James said, I mean, it's very similar. Like the attitude of my fellow students was like, yeah, let's go into this very highly specialized field. Let's grind ourselves down to pass these exams and do the direct competition access to PhD and things like that. And I mean, I was seeing that. I mean, if you see that together with very high level, strong ideas and so on, then great. But I was seeing that together with people that literally misunderstood physics and mathematics at some basic levels, right? I mean, you had conversations. I mean, largely it was fine, but then here and there you saw like misgivings and like, oh, this guy actually doesn't understand when he's saying covariant derivative is not. He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? And so yeah, I was very disillusioned. I mean, it's not to say that the people in Cambridge were bad. I mean, they were very good in terms of research, but the whole atmosphere was very unwelcoming. I mean, it felt like you really had to be indoctrinated into the religion of theoretical physics to be able to make progress within the institution. So, I mean, I don't use the indoctrination lightly, and not just because James has mentioned it before, but I've consistently described my experience in theoretical physics since last few years of the undergrad and my master's and so on as something like indoctrination. You had a lecturer that was explaining uh, highly mathematical concepts of quantum field theory to students who had no background in differential geometry whatsoever, or Hilbert spaces. So these people are naturally taking everything on faith, right? Like you're basically presented with a set of propositions and language and ideas that vaguely make sense. And I'm not criticizing the intuition behind them, but the actual formal system is very dogmatic in a way. Like you had to believe, you had to, this is the Lorentz covariant thing, and it's like nobody knows what Lorentz covariant means, like in this context. So I was very dissatisfied with that, and that's why mostly I went on to do pure mathematics. I did a PhD in pure mathematics. I just said okay, because I always had a very, as I said in my Discord comment, had a tension between aesthetics and pragmatism constantly, because I'm a very artistic person. I like music, I like drawing and sculpture and 3D graphics and whatnot, and I was always sort of battling between doing one or the other, or going more aesthetics. Eventually decided more on the aesthetics, and that's why I did pure maths, because I thought this is just art. I'm gonna do formal art for a few years, and yeah, eventually I refound my motivation to go back to the root of knowledge, and yeah, pretty much like James said, like I realized the power of abstract thinking and going after ideas that are deep and not obvious, and that take serious consideration, and you have to be creative to get there, and so on. And yeah, so basically I funded my society, and we invited Stephen, and he agreed to be an advisor, and here I am, because he then sort of invited me into the Wolfram Sphere, and then I met James, and yes, and so here I am. So I do feel, like I said in the Discord comment, that this is a natural space to be. I mean, it's not that I've given up entirely on academia, in the sense that I don't think it's rotten to the core that is insalvageable, but I'm not betting on it getting any better anytime soon. I'm not holding my breath of like, oh yeah, if this group just did a little bit better, then I mean, I'm not holding my breath for that. So in the time being, I think this kind of ideas, this kind of projects, like the Wolfram Institute, like what we did with our society, and many other sort of like startup-y like things that are propping up, they're quite independent. I think those are, in a way, the future. I mean, as Nick said, really galvanized by the internet and like free access to information, and he also mentioned this idea of like a free market of lecturing that I think is very interesting, that we should, at some point, we should tap into. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of the status quo, and cool ideas. Here I am. And that's what the summary is.
Yeah, I think one important takeaway that you can derive from all this, because I think that individual Macy also asked for kind of general advice for someone who wants to study. To advice for younger scientists wanting to pursue a future in academics. Well, it depends on what the person means by academics. If this counts, then the answer is quite different. But I think one important takeaway is that the four of us have not only our respective backgrounds are different from one another, and then they're also quite different from our peers. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I don't think I'm really old enough to give people advice, but I think, the main thing I can say is, I think if you see other people who are successful, you could learn all about their background and all the decisions that they made, but I think that trying to replicate that sequence of decisions is probably not a good idea, for a few reasons. I mean, one is that people are very unique, and that person managed to make a number of choices, and that combined with their own personal qualities led to success, but you don't have those qualities. You have different qualities, and those qualities could set you up for success, but I think ultimately at a fine level, people are really quite different, and their backgrounds are quite different. The other thing is that people, the kind of the story of each individual is like very kind of historically contingent, and there are like different opportunities that arise, and people manage to kind of just make decisions that I mean, if they're successful, to make decisions that are gainful, within some set of choices that they have at the time, and you'll have some completely different set of choices. So I think But the other thing is that if someone has already kind of made a niche for themselves, if you literally just go after that niche, then you'll be at best kind of part of the secondary wave of a lot of people who kind of gather around some particular opportunity that someone made. And so, really the better thing, I think, one thing that you can gather from our respective stories is just, one is have some convictions, have strong beliefs, um, forge those over time. I mean, I like to say, even in my own case, it might sound like we're trying to sound rebellious or something when we're all making these comments about academic experience. But like when I was younger, it was just miserable, like just kind of suffering all the time, And the choices that I made, see, it was basically like, there were certain things that just made me really angry, certain things I just didn't want to do. And it was like, desperately trying to figure out what you could do from there. So it was like you have some strong belief, you have some convictions, and then you just try and do what you can at any given moment that doesn't violate those, and then you kind of let that guide you. And with time, if you find people who share those beliefs or respect you, then you get more and more kind of opportunities. But I would say if you want to do anything kind of in the sciences or anything that's intellectually interesting, you know, if you do it in academia or not in academia, I mean, the most important thing I think is just to really care about what you're doing and to be independent, because it's like at the time you're just going to seem maybe like an outsider or people will disagree with you. And that's, I would say kind of safely, people whom who really stand out, people who are kind of exceptional, who have their own kind of persona, who have their own presence, who are different from everyone else. Like they were like that before they were well known. And before they were well known, they didn't have any power. Before they had any power, people just like disagreed with them a lot, and they're probably pretty lonely. So, you know, now you could be really lonely and no one could like you because you're like making a bunch of mistakes as well. So that's like the really hard thing about being independent is being a complete failure and getting everything wrong and having bad ideas will have the same outcome in many instances as having really good ideas and being independent, etc. So that's like the hardest psychological thing. That was hard psychologically for me. I don't know if it was hard for Nick or for Łukasz, for Carlos, anyone. But it's like when you just decide I'm gonna go on an alternative path, it's like there are people who also just have a bunch of really bad ideas who also do that. And so um, trying to have conviction and test your ideas and find ways to really gain skills and prove to yourself that you've built these skills, and being very disciplined whilst you also work independently is really the key thing. And so then you're learning to kind of push yourself instead of having other people push you, and you start to get more and more annoyed when other people try and push you because you're aware that you can kind of do it yourself. Uh, other people, Nick, you have advice. Nick loves to give advice, obviously. So
Well, not on a spot like that, but
I was kidding. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I've ever heard you give people advice.
well, yeah, because the whole reason to make people think independently, giving them advice is just it just kind of goes against it.
Yes.
Right. Do your own thing. Don't care about me or other people advices.
Yeah. There's the paradoxical advice, though.
Yeah.
Don't listen to me.
Don't listen to me.
It's like the liar's paradox. Advice, not listen.
Okay, so I think there was. Let me see. I thought this question was quite interesting. So Joel said, did we talk about this already? Um, maybe we actually covered this already. Wait. Yes. We talked about the space of all possible. Oh no, I don't think we talked about this specifically. So Joel said, consider all the mathematical statements that have appeared in mathematical books or papers. We can view this as some sense as observed phenomena of human mathematics. If we're going to make a general theory of mathematics, a first step is to do something like we typically do in natural science and try to drill down to find a uniform underlying model, or at least a representation of all of them. How we observe these things also would also be a very intriguing thing to formally model. At the very least, it includes an element of observation, i.e., data collection, and computation, i.e., assessing what laws might apply to the data. So this is more of a comment, but I think it could prompt interesting discussion here.
Oh, is this from Joel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Where is that question?
In metamathematics.
Nice.
Yeah.
We have discussed this topic, but we didn't address the question before.
Yeah, so one thing, I mean, Joel has had a few ideas that are quite interesting. I think about kind of further explore. I think some of the questions that Joel has posed, how should I say this? Some of Joel's questions kind of probe greater dualities between our models of physics and metamathematics. So they're kind of two things that I've heard Joel pose before. So one is we've had like empirical metamathematics where you take different theorems in mathematics and you study their structure. And Joel has been interested in the past in seeing that done for physics. Like, why don't you have, empirical physics? Because technically in mathematical physics, you could, I suppose, do that just as we do it with formalized math libraries in math. You could technically do that for physics. So that's one thing that Joel has asked about before. I think in this case, he's asking, we have this kind of generative model that we do seek for physics. I don't know if it will actually be one. It could be several. It might not be one rule. It might be a whole family of rules. But I think to simplify Joel's question somewhat, is there something like that for mathematics where if there's a certain kind of cosmos of mathematical truth that we're kind of sampling when we happen to extract certain theorems that are true, are there kind of rules that generate it? Now, I think the work that we've done already does suggest at least one answer to that, which is if you're working within some axiomatic system, then your axioms really are the rules that generate all of that. So if what you're doing ultimately can be reduced down to the axioms of some particular formal theory, then you can, instead of reducing it down, you could generate from those axioms, just treating them as computational rules, you could generate this whole entailment structure, and the theorem that you found will be contained in it. So in some sense, that really is the point of, or at least that was one thing that we did in the metamathematics project. Now, one thing that I really worry about, and maybe like when Richard Assar comes and we have better computing capabilities, this can be resolved. But one thing that does concern me, and it concerns me when I think about the mathematics project or also the physics project, is that we can always show very early stages of generation, and then it becomes largely unfeasible. So we can show, take this particular axiomatic system, and we can compute this entailment structure from it, showing it multi-computationally. But there are examples. It might be like field theory if you account for bi-substitution and co-substitution, where even 2-3 steps, at least graphically, cannot be shown easily. Now, if you don't show it graphically, and if you make some nice hacks so that you can compute things with greater speed, maybe you can grow a larger and larger entailment structure. But we do have a problem that we tend to, at this point, we care about mathematics that has many dependencies. And when you kind of do reverse mathematics and you go from whatever theorem you have down to the dependencies, sometimes you have to descend, um, a considerable distance, so to speak, down to the axioms. And I'm somewhat doubtful. You see, you can drill down from some particular theorem down to the axioms by basically reverse mathematics. But then if you want to generate the structure that will capture that theorem, it also has to capture all the other theorems that are linked to your core axiom system by paths of the same length. And I imagine that overall structure is just enormous. And so it seems as though the kind of the work that Stephen did that we helped with um, this past year of showing that you can generate these structures from axiomatic rules. I mean, I think it's suggestive. I think it's kind of gestural, kind of expository, but I don't think anything unless we make some serious improvements in the way in which we compute these and represent the computations. I don't think we're going to climb its entailment structure to kind of non-trivial theorems. It's going to involve an extensive amount of exhaustive computation to get there. So I think it's yeah, and
always seeking for some explicit generation or simulation of such things. I don't think it's an important point. As soon as you understand phenomenologically what is actually happening, actually simulating it is not really insightful anymore.
well, that's the point that I'm making, right? Is that it gives one the indication that you could do so, further because you see enough examples, but we don't actually show the examples, right? It's just kind of it's a somewhat strange way to do science in some sense, where there are things that computationally we can't really do, but we can show very simple toy examples, and then we kind of and then we just help people kind of use your imagination from there.
We have to be smarter and coarse-grained. Right? That's what people do in physics. We do it, right? That's why we can do a lot of stuff actually in computing in our world without even discussing what actually happens on subatomic level. Here it's actually more subatomic than that, right? If you actually believe that physics, for example, is mathematics underneath. So you just have to do some smart coarse graining, but phenomenologically nothing changes. You just have to be smarter to find it or constructually.
Sure. I mean, we haven't done this, but of course we could, where we have multi-way systems that deal with objects that have dependencies. Usually we're just beginning at the axiomatic level and performing rewrites from there. But you could just, do rewrites with objects that have greater dependencies, and you don't show all those dependencies. I mean, I think this is something that Łukasz will find with time when we actually start working with these different groups in the Langlands philosophy. Those groups have significant baggage attached to them, and we're working through all that baggage right now. But with time, we'll have to have some sort of way of doing computations where, yes, if you wanted to unfurl those computations, you would find that there's a significant structure, a significant dependency structure attached to them. And we can show that. And if you want to kind of break one of those groups open and look at everything that's involved in there, if you want to understand the greater context that gives them significance, you can. But in general, if you're just computing with them, you're setting that aside for convenience. I think I have another call in maybe about 5 minutes, and I should probably just prepare a little bit for that. Also, Carlos looks like he needs like a nap or something. I know, but yeah. Well, these four always go by rather quickly, especially I guess when we all deliver long form answers. But yeah, this was fun. And so today is a special day because we are going to have our first meeting with some of our research affiliates. So this is something that we've actually been kind of, in one way or another, we've been kind of preparing for this, I would say, for some time, and finally now we have an opportunity to meet. So for those of you who are on the stream and you want to see some fresh faces, you're sick of seeing us all the time, me with my nondescript blank background, Nick with his warm orange, nonetheless fuzzy background, and Wukash with his wooden background. Carlos at least has a somewhat variable background. But if you want to see some new people and some new backgrounds, then attend that. It's gonna happen in 90 minutes. So hope to see you there.
All right.
Carlos, are you gonna be alive by then?
I think so. I'll make it.
Okay. All right.
All right. See
See
you
ya.
later.
See you.